Hi, I am Jennifer Hancock. I am a humanist, and I like to watch Indian movies, specifically Hindi movies, but I watch all language movies. And I recently watched a movie called Kaala Patthar. It's an old movie, 1979, I think. Stars Amitabh Bachchan and Shashi Kapoor and others. And it's based on a real story, apparently. It's about some coal miners, who... It's about a coal mine disaster, loosely based on that, obviously. There was a coal mine disaster. These things happen. They happen in America. They happen in India. They're devastating when they happen. They're specifically devastating to the people and the families who work in them. So what I want to do first is kind of critique the movie, review and critique the movie, and then talk about the issues that this movie brings up. I thought the movie was very timely, even though it was made in 1979. The issues that it brings up about exploitative capitalism as opposed to humanistic economies, I think it was very, 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 very relevant to conversations we're having in the US right now about humanistic approaches to the economy and business management. So let's talk about this movie first. This is a movie that, this is a little bit about the trailer, right? It's an action film with a multi-star cast. Amitabh, Rahi, Shashi, Praveen, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Everybody in this movie was really good. Just really spectacularly good. This really was an all-star cast. Amitabh Bachchan plays Vijay. He plays our central character, man with a past. He's kind of damaged goods. He falls in love with Rahi, who's the doctor at the mine. All we know about this guy is he's very, very smart. He's selfless in that he's willing to risk his life to help others. He falls in love with the doctor, played by Rahi. Now, Shashi Kapoor is the engineer. He's the mining engineer. He comes to work to this company as an engineer and then discovers that this mine is very near a lake, and if they drill too close to this lake, it will flood the mine. And he falls in love with Parveen, who is our reporter. So these are two upper class people who are trying to make sure that the workers are taken care of properly. And then you have, I think it's Shatrughan. Oh, forgive me for mispronouncing names. He's a bad guy. He comes out of prison and escapes to this mine. And he falls in love with Chanu, who's played by Neeta Singh, who's a jewelry, lower class. She's a jewelry seller. And so we have three couples, middle class, upper class, and lower class, and they all meet at this mine, in this coal mine, where conditions are not just bad, but the owner of the mine is extremely exploitative of the workers. He doesn't view them as human beings. If they die, he really doesn't care. His mine has a really high accident rate, and he's not doing anything to fix that because he simply doesn't care. So that's where the engineer and the reporter come in. Saving people from the mine is what Vijay does and what the doctor does. And the two are criminal and the jewelry seller, are the everyman. But they all come together in this movie. And it's really good. The action of it, I thought for Amitabh Bachchan, this was a really great role. I mean, he plays so many different things. Obviously, he's pretty young in this movie, and he did a lot of movies with Shashi Kapoor and buddy films, kind of things like that. And I love seeing the two of them together. I had never seen, however you pronounce his name, what was it again? Shatrughan. He was really good. I liked him too. And all the women were really excellent in this movie. It was kind of 6 equal people acting in this movie, and the acting was really good. Now, this was 1979, so some of the special effects and the fight sequences were not what we'd expect these days, but they were still really very exciting. So I'm going to give you an example of one of the fight scenes. Just takes a flying jump. And you can see the blood. It's like bright red paint. And there's Shashi breaking it up. So the action sequences, this movie is filled with action sequences. Amitabh Bachchan fights with the Mongol character, the Shatar, how do you pronounce his name's character. Shashi Kapoor is fighting bad guys to protect the workers. And so everybody's fighting everybody. And so there's a lot of fighting that goes on. And I don't know that that's realistic for a mining community. I would assume people, their lives depend on one another for safety. So I don't know how much, fighting goes on in these things. But at the same time, you get a huge group of people together, there's going to be arguments. So I did like that. Now, if you've never seen Amitabh Bachchan before and you don't understand his acting chops, let me give you this. This sequence includes like pretty much the only English that's in the movie, and sometimes you do get it because they do speak English. And this is just Amitabh being Amitabh.
Why don't you understand?
Why don't you understand, Doctor? That pain is my destiny and I can't avoid it.
That pain is my destiny and I can't avoid it. So that sequence was, he had been injured helping someone else and she wanted to give him a shot or something. He said, no, don't disinfect my wound, just wrap it up. She goes, why don't you understand that you need more care? And he goes, why don't you understand? Pain is my destiny. And that's kind of their relationship. We find out that his character obviously has a backstory. There's a reason he's there, and there's a reason he's doing the things he does, and he's seeking redemption that he didn't think he deserves. So this movie doesn't have a lot of songs. It's a drama and it's a disaster movie because there's going to be a flood of the mine. How can there not be a flood? They're drilling next to a lake, and the owner says, take it as close as you can. I don't care. If we end up flooding, and some people die. The owner is a really bad guy, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But there are some songs in this movie, and they were absolutely delightful. Here's the first song that has Shashi arriving at the mine. He's on his way. He's singing about loving life and things like that. There's also some dance sequences that feature I'm so bad with name, Nidu doing a dance sequence during a wedding of one of the miners and his bride. So the movie was good. I was totally invested in the movie. Yes, it's a 1979 movie. Yes, the subplots were a bit over the top. But for me, the main thing about this movie had to do with the exploration of exploitative capitalism in its rawest form. And we still have things like this going on in the US. We have a mining family, a fossil fuel coal mining family that's very prominent in politics, and they have an abysmal safety record at their mines, and that's going on right now in the US. And we don't have a lot of coal miners left in this country, but we do have one of the most politically powerful families in this country owns coal mines, and they advocate for policies that have no oversight of the mines. They have a bad track record for safety in their mines, and them thinking they have the right to take the money, and the safety and well-being of literally the rest of the country doesn't matter, because coal mines in the US, if they're strip mining a mountain, they're throwing all that tailing down into a river, which is then being polluted, and the people who rely on that river for food and water and sustenance no longer can rely on that. And that doesn't just affect the people in the coal mine, it affects the whole community in which that coal mine operates in. So there's a conversation that has to be had in capitalist societies where does the pursuit of individual wealth and greed, is that unfettered, or do individuals that are hurt by that unfettered greed, search for capital and the greed that feeds that, do they have a right to not be harmed by this sort of capitalism? Because not all capitalism is exploitative. There's different ways to be capitalist. Some of it's exploitative, some of it isn't. In the US, it happens to be very exploitative. Not all of our capitalism is exploitative, but it seems like when you look at our history with slavery and you keep going forth, that the people that are spending the most money to control and manipulate government are those capitalists that are exploitative. And I say this because I live in a county I live 2 blocks from a slave plantation, an old slave plantation. And one of the places one of the parks I go to go for walks is where an old cooperatively owned fishing camp was. And the cooperatively owned fishing camp was cooperatively owned. A bunch of fishermen were there and they worked together and they cooperatively owned the camp and they cooperatively worked and got the proceeds and things like that. So it's still a capitalist enterprise, but it was cooperatively owned instead of individually and exploitatively owned as the plantation down the road was. Well, the guy that owned the plantation convinced the military to evict the cooperatively owned fishing camp down the road. And we see this pattern play out over and over and over again, where there's cooperative models of economy, and then there's exploitative models. And it's always the exploitative model that causes so much harm to people because it's exploitative. And it's a problem. It's a problem. And I have a problem understanding how we don't see it for what it is, that this is pathological. This is not humanistic. It's dangerous. And people that are displaying this sort of greed should not be celebrated as, standards of our economic community. They should be shunned because the way they're going about making money hurts people. And it's therefore criminal in my mind. So this is what I was thinking about while I'm watching this movie. This 1979 Indian movie about a coal mine disaster that is based on a real disaster that occurred. I'm thinking about currently how the same sort of person that runs the mine in this movie reminds me of certain individuals today and yesterday and in our history. And certainly collectively, can we come to some sort of agreement that this sort of exploitative model of extracting capital and rent seeking off the labor of other people is exploitative, and it's unhealthy, and it's not good for our economy? It might be good for an individual, but it's not good for the economy, and it's not good for society. And I truly believe that we can have both businesses that work and make money and that are good for the employees and the communities in which those businesses operate. We can do both. This is not an either or situation. We can, in fact, do both. So let's talk about this movie, because again, the central part of this is that they dig too close to a lake and cause a flood. And I'm not going to tell you how it resolves and who lives and who dies, because that would spoil the movie. But this was avoidable. The whole point of this movie to me was that this was avoidable. This didn't have to happen. And the engineer tried to make it not happen. Our hero Amitabh Bachchan, Vijay, in the character of Vijay, threatened the owner of the mine to make it not happen. And the owner of the mine just said, screw y'all, I'm going to make it happen. And he intentionally did this to his workers by pushing it too far, knowing that this was probably going to be the outcome. And you think, well, why would someone that's like, no one's that evil? And the reality is there are people that evil, and they should not be held up as bastions of the community because they are pathologically evil. They are so greedy that they cannot think past themselves to the communities in which they live and work. So the solution of this movie is the pushing of socialism in India at the time. That was this. One of the ways to think about this movie is a propaganda film for the nationalization of the mines. That the coal was needed for energy, but did it need to be extracted in a way that not only hurt the people laboring to get this coal, but the only person who really benefited from it was one person? No. So socializing and nationalizing this industry, better working conditions, better safety records, and a better distribution of the wealth generated from the labor. And that's something to think about. Now, I'm not for communalistic systems, because the top-down management also comes with problems. Capitalism, laissez-faire capitalism, devolves into exploitative capitalism, and it hurts people. But the same thing can happen with forced socialism, right? Where the community is primary and the individual disappears as well. I mean, part of the problem with exploitative capitalism is the individual disappears within it, and it doesn't matter. The only individual that matters is the capitalist. All the workers don't matter, and their individuality is kind of erased. The same thing can happen in extreme socialism, exploitative socialism, where the community is what is important and the individual kind of disappears, and their needs disappear and are subordinated to the community. The humanistic approach is to balance the individual and the community and protect both, because you can protect both. It's completely possible to protect both the individual and the community. But that requires that to be the priority. You can't say the individual is paramount and screw the community, and you shouldn't be saying the community is paramount, screw the individual. Both are important. The individual needs the community to thrive, and the community thrives when individuals thrive. It's both together. And this is, I think, what makes a humanistic approach a healthier, more balanced approach, because by definition, it's about finding that balance. A friend of mine, a new friend of mine named Raul Chalasani, is an Indian American, wrote a very interesting book, about halfway through it right now. It's about humanism as an economic system. And he talks about American capitalism and Chinese socialist capitalism as two different capitalist models, and talks about how we might join them together. And this is a book I've wanted to write because you read Marx's Das Kapital and you see the flaws in capitalism, and you read Hayek's The Road to Serfdom and you see the problems with communalism and socialism run amok in the form of communism. And you think, well, there's got to be a way to take the benefits of a capitalist system, which involves the creativity and individual expression and experimentation, but marry it to the needs of the community, so that one is not subordinate to the other, but that they feed each other. And that's basically the book that my friend Rao has written. I'm going to include a link to it in the comment section so you can check it out. It's a relatively new book, but I think it's relevant to the conversations that we're having, or at least people in my network are having, about the need to change the paradigm about what business is. Now, most of the business schools in America have switched to teaching humanistic business management. as a philosophic approach to businesses. There's also a B Corp movement to create corporations that are not beholden to the shareholders, but corporations whose purpose is to benefit the community. And these are just slight changes that we're talking about. We're not talking about wholesale changes to the way we do business, but just to tweak the legal structure so that the community and labor are valued equally with the creation of capital. We're not talking about not creating capital. We're talking about creating capital, because societies have definitely improved in the capitalist model, but capitalism run amok causes so many problems that it needs to kind of be balanced by these other forces. And unless you have a legal structure that requires that balance, I don't see how you don't end up with situations like what this movie is, where you have an owner who has no requirement and no qualms about harming his employees, because to him, his employees don't matter. The only thing that matters to him is how much capital he can extract. And we have that problem with corporations and shareholders, that the only thing shareholders are looking at is the return on the investment. And who can blame them? But that myopic view that the only thing that matters is this ignores the human element that needs to be brought back in there. So for me, this movie, the whole time I was watching, I was thinking, wow, like everybody needs this is the problem with exploitative capitalism in a nutshell. And I'd like to see a more humanistic capitalism emerge and be supported by law, where the needs of the individual and the worker, the labor, is increased and the value derived from labor is increased, because capitalism tends to have a downward pressure on wages, which is why minimum wages have to be implemented. And that's a whole other discussion. But also that the needs of the community that is being served by this business or harmed by this business are also, all three are taken into account. So what is the driver of the capital? What is going on with the people involved in making that capital happen? And what is the community experiencing by the extraction of this capital? Because not all businesses are neutral that way. If they were, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But because certain businesses may be necessary but cause harm, we should be collectively having a discussion about how much harm and to whom are we having. Like the United States just went through and is still dealing with a pipeline issue where we're trying to get oil from one place to another, but the doing of that is harming communities through spills and aquifer problems and all sorts of things. And if we're not willing to have the conversation about what is the cost of, so yeah, we can see the money generated from this, but if we're not also considering the societal costs that economic extraction, capital extraction is causing, then we're not, as a community, doing the cost-benefit analysis that we should be doing to make decisions. And I'm so sick of not being allowed to have these conversations, because as soon as you say it, well, then you're anti-capitalist. No, I'm a friggin' capitalist. That's why I want to have these conversations. I am a capitalist. That's why I want to have these conversations. I just think that exploitative capitalism is evil in all its forms. And whether we're talking about it as the greed motive or however we're talking about it, it's not acceptable. And I don't think we should be pretending that it is. The idea that we either allow capitalists to exploit and kill the rest of us, or we're evil. Like, how does anybody get there? We can both create capital and protect the community and the individuals creating that capital at the same time. It's not either or. We can do both. Let's have the conversation about doing both instead of pretending that anybody who wants to have that conversation is evil. You know, this is kind of like criminals don't want you to have a conversation that says, no, we're not going to allow you to steal from us anymore. Of course they don't want a law that says stealing is bad and I'm going to go to jail if I steal. But that's exactly what they're doing. When they're extracting our coal, Like, we own this collective. This is our country. When they extract it, when they pollute our streams, they are harming us. They are harming our community. We have a right to say enough is enough and that we want this changed. We in the community matter, and the person with the most money should not be dictating everything. And this exploitative capitalism goes hand in hand with political corruption. It's not surprising that criminals try to buy off the cops. We should not be allowing them to do that. And in this case, the cops would be our government and the regulations that the government writes about whether or not certain activities are legal or not. Polluting streams should be illegal. Not having safety regulations in dangerous industries like coal mining should be illegal. We should have regulations that require owners to provide safety. Like in this movie, the doctor doesn't even have the medicine she needs to treat the people working in the mine. That should not be okay. This is why America has occupational safety hazard administration and rules about workplace safety. They're not to harm the capitalists. They're protect the people from the capitalists. And yes, that's a necessary thing that we do, because there will always be people who are greedy in our society. They're always going to be there. And we do need to protect ourselves from, just as we need laws to protect ourselves from people robbing our house, we need laws to protect us from criminals in the form of a business who are destroying our homes. Of course we do. Regulation is actually good for the company. I used to work for a company that had me go up to DC to participate in our industry association. And my goal, the reason they sent me up there, was to encourage our industry association to promote regulations, because smart regulations are good for the economy, because they make sure that no one is cheating, that one company isn't exploiting people and exploiting the environment and the community at the expense of everyone else, because that's bad for our industry. That's bad for every industry when that happens. And it's bad for the community, and it's bad for the workers. So let's not tolerate this anymore. Let's recognize the exploitative capitalism for what it is, and regulate it so that we don't allow people like this to do things like this. All right. I want to end this by talking about a couple of quotes from the movie that I thought were relevant. And I've got both, the first one, I've got the Hindi on it. The first one is, the coal mine is a python which swallows countless workers every day and chews them, crushes them, smashes them. It sucks every drop of life from their body and then spits them out in the form of a dead body. They're talking about, mining is dangerous work. And before the industry was regulated, death was really common. We still have accidents and problems. But with regulation, we can minimize or mitigate those problems. And that's a good thing. Because until we make the transition to cleaner, renewable energy sources, which we absolutely need to be doing for security reasons, because the people that control the oil, I don't know if you've noticed this, but they're not good people. And being able to democratize energy generation, production, and distribution is going to prevent those people who control our energy economy from controlling the energy economy. And right now, the people who control our energy economy, not necessarily all good people. They're kind of like the guy who runs the company in this movie. So criminals. And I don't even want to talk about, what is Putin doing right now in Russia? It's all about oil and energy. It's all about controlling the oil energy economy over there. All right. So the next quote I love: time comes when not speaking up becomes a sin. I think we're at that point again now. And it frustrates me that every 20, 30 years, we have to have this conversation again, but maybe that's just the state of things. Whatever we come up with to mitigate against these horrible people exploiting the rest of us, eventually they water down the regulations and start exploiting us again. And it's just a cycle we keep going through. We get exploited, we fight back, we get the regulations, the exploitation stops for a while, things are better, and then they whittle away at the regulations. Not everybody. Some people, some companies want regulations, but the bad ones, the ones that want to break the law, the ones that want to extract every last dollar without giving a crap about them, they lobby, they spend money. They spend more money than they get back doing this on principle. Like the Koch brothers here do this on principle. And then we end up back where we were before. And I think we just need to acknowledge that this is always going to be a problem. There's always going to be people like this in our community, and we need to be vigilant for them and not let them roll back these regulations that we put in place to protect ourselves from people like that. So time comes when not speaking up becomes a sin. We're there now. Thanks so much. Again, this was a really good movie. I was really energized by it, really frustrated by it. And it just kind of triggered all my humanistic concerns about the economy. Watch the movie. It's really good.